Welcome back. Given the pace of this year's food price rises, governments in emerging markets have no alternative but to try to soften the blow. In the past, governments used to subsidize food that people cannot afford to buy. But some experts argue that subsidizing goods is not always an efficient remedy, and that subsidizing the incomes of the poor rather than the food itself may minimize price distortions. So far, most government interventions in the poor world have failed to reduce poverty or achieve any significant development. Politicians who seem to think cheap food is part of the natural order of things have slapped on price control and export restraints, which have not shown much success so far. Well, Al Jazeera asked a number of Arab citizens in many Arab countries about the impact of rising prices on their daily life. This is what some of them had to say.
The situation was difficult in 2007. I expect it to be even more difficult in 2008, because in the light of the increasing prices, there's a category of people who can't make ends meet, given the economic burdens and the increasing prices of clothes and food.
People discuss issues such as bread and how people cannot afford it anymore, and the government cannot even provide it to its people. There are 20 million rich people in Egypt, and 50 million others living below the poverty line.
My observation regarding the state of the Moroccan economy is the official figures are absolutely not compatible with the reality. According to the official statements, Morocco is witnessing economic growth, prosperity, development. In reality, we discover the Moroccan citizens are still living in poverty amid increasing prices and a number of economic problems the country is facing.
We are witnessing incredible circumstances here in Kuwait. All goods prices have increased. Petrol prices increased recently. Food prices also went up. All prices increasing, and we do not know what is happening here. We hope our government will consider this issue.
We have seen a sharp increase in the prices of the goods and properties, thus leading to an increasing inflation in the Sultanate. These have been the most significant changes and the main source of concern for the Omanis.
Joining us again are our guest in Amman, Dr. Ibrahim Saif, an economist and director of the Center of Strategic Studies at the University of Jordan. In Dubai, Ibrahim Khayyat, strategic and business analyst. And in Sharjah, Alexander Mosizov, associate professor at the Skyline College in Sharjah. Mr. Ibrahim Khayyat, subsidizing, no subsidizing, is it still an option in the world now?
It is an option, basically. What's happening is we have a producer, who is the farmer on the other end. Either he's producing for the local community, for the local society. So like the United States are probably providing subsidies to its own farmers, around $11 to $15 billion a year, because they want to serve their own community and their own consumers, and also to serve the purpose of the exports. While in other countries which are importing countries, most of the third world or developing countries are becoming now net importers in many areas of agricultural produce. So now what's happening is if you give subsidies, you're giving them to the consumer. The issue here is to help them either through the income, you give him money or safety net, social safety net, or you give by compressing or controlling the prices. What you're trying to do here is to control the prices distortion through these measures. And this
Before talking about those regulations, Mr. Ibrahim Khayyat,
1 second.
This has been a very classical debate in the 60s and the 70s about the efficiency of subsidizing. Mr. Alexander, now if you are to subsidize, you have to inject some of the cash into those social development programs. The problem is that most countries are running out of cash because of the problems we have been talking about so far, like the high rises in oil. So how can you juggle both?
Well, excuse me, we have to differ subsidies in Europe and in the States with subsidies in the Middle East, for example. Subsidies in Europe, they are targeted to 5% of the population. In the United States, to 2% of the population. Here we're talking 40–50% of population. So impact of subsidies here and there are much different. Second, with these differences comes outcomes. If you stop subsidizing right away, it will be, as we agreed, a social uproar. Instead, what I suggest, subsidies should be, those money that are now spent on subsidies, they should be spent on advanced technology, on improvement of methods, on increasing yields, on education, if you will, to make agriculture viable in front of pressure from American and European agricultural products.
So Ibrahim, say like in Jordan, Morocco, Algeria and other countries, these countries have already started to break some of the spending promises because of the heavy bill of oil imports. I'm basically referring to Jordan, Morocco and Egypt. Is this something that is not going to lead to more instability in these countries?
Well, let me just a little bit I'll present my argument regarding whether the subsidy is an option or not. I think really we have to consider that the conventional way, the traditional way of subsidizing commodities, I think is no longer valid. And the reason for this is that even the budget deficit in all these countries that we're talking about that are either food importers or fuel importers, there is no way that they can really continue now subsidizing these commodities. And then instead, I think they have to adopt a kind of active subsidies policies where they link this within a time frame, and also again, and I here agree with Alexander that they have to introduce these new technologies and also to link and not only to keep institutionalizing poverty in these countries instead of fighting poverty by putting an end to this.
But now, Ibrahim, sorry to interrupt you, but don't you think that we're talking about a problem that has a global impact rather than impacting the poor or sort of developing countries? If you're talking about farmers in the US shifting to biofuel, because they're getting more money out of that. We're talking about capricious climatic conditions. You're basically saying that the world will be facing a lot of problems and the rich countries will also have to pay the price. Don't you think so, Mr. Ibrahim Khayyat?
I believe the main issue here is not to be like we've seen the last 5-6 decades when we started talking about developing countries and the colonial economy. It is not to be ideological, this is right and this is wrong. We're trying to find a solution. One of the issues that we are witnessing today, we're trying to analyze in the first part of this program, is that we have supply disruptions. How can we face them without making the poor households paying the social cost? This is about discussing government policies, and this should be studied case by case. But now we have a main trend. If we're talking about increase in prices, the main trend since 1960 till last year, that the real agriculture prices have decreased. There was downward trend by 56%. Last year and the year before it has increased. There are other prices, the metals, minerals, the commodities since 2001 until now have increased by 80%. Who is going to pay? The poorest country cannot afford it. So the government has to come with at least temporary solution. It's not to say this has been old, we don't want it.
So if we're talking about temporary solutions, Mr. Alexander, why the international community is not stepping up and try find solutions the same way it is stepping up to broker peace deals in the world and stop wars?
Well, that is not true. International community steps up. There are so many governmental, intergovernmental, and non-governmental organizations, WTO, Oxfam, World Bank, if you will. It's, I think, what is missing in the whole setup that we are talking about. One general focus. We, developing countries, developed countries, have to come up with the general policies, focus and force towards major goals, and do it all together, not say left hand, right hand, or something else. There's got to be general movement towards the, and there is actually, United Nations has poverty reduction development program. So I think they should take it under their wing, all the efforts of both internationals and nationals.
Gentlemen, we don't want to end up the first day of 2008 on a pessimistic note, but I would like to hear your, the answers of three of you guys on this question. Is the crisis of commodities and food something that will shape our future the same way wars do? Mr. Ibrahim Saif.
Well, I would make the quote from the Economist magazine lately, which is the end of the cheap food era. And I totally agree that it's not only policies and it's not only shortage of supply, but also the increase in the demand also in countries like China and India as a result of their expanding and growing economies that also influence the prices.
I believe in the economy we always witness cycles. We shouldn't be pessimistic or optimistic. We should be looking for solutions, and we should be maintaining.
In 10 seconds, Mr. Alexander Mosisov.
I think we should be optimistic. Mankind faced many crises in its way. We can cope with it. It's just a matter of focus and policies bind together.
We have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Indeed, it's really a world that is changing. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Ibrahim Saif from Amman, Ibrahim Khayyat from Dubai, and Mr. Alexander Mosisov from Sharjah. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Goodbye for now.